G'day guys, welcome back to the channel, and today of course we are here to review round 8. Kind of a rivalry round, if you could say that. I think only the Perth teams didn't actually have a rivalry game this weekend, but of course a lot of big matchups throughout round 8, and we start all the way back on Thursday night with a massive game, of course, Showdown 55, Crows up against Port Adelaide, and it was the Adelaide Crows who broke in front on the ledger with their 28th win in Showdowns, beating Port Adelaide by 30 points. Adelaide was 78, Port were 48 in the end. A couple of injury concerns from this game. Connor Rozee was subbed out at three-quarter time with a hamstring injury, or hamstring tightness. I don't know about that. My brother's very angry about that. He's a Port fan, and he was very upset with the fact that Ken Hinkley decided to play him when he clearly wasn't fit enough to play. I know some people have said that the hamstring wasn't the same sort of injury, but come on, dude, I don't know about that. There's no such thing as a 1-week hamstring, or sorry, a 0-week hamstring injury in the footy, and I know the showdown is very important, but it's not as important as your whole season, and if Connor Rozee's out for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks now, that's going to be a massive impact on Port Adelaide's season. There was another injury as well for Port Adelaide. Mitch Georgiades had ice on his knee in the last quarter. Obviously didn't play out the rest of the game, so that's really concerning. I don't think it's as serious as an ACL by any means, but he has obviously had an ACL injury in his career, Georgiades, and that would be massive if he was out for a couple of weeks. Todd Marshall did roll his ankle as well late in the game, but I think he'll be fine. So let's get to the game itself. The Crows started well with the first 3 goals of the game and 5 of the first 6, but surprisingly enough, Port Adelaide dominated the territory battle with 18 inside 50s to the Crows only 8 in the first quarter, and Port Adelaide did kick the last 2 goals of the first quarter and were only down by 8 points at quarter time. In a tight second term, the Crows kicked the only 2 goals of it and led by 19 points at half-time. And the missed opportunities in the second and third terms from Port Adelaide really shone through. They kicked 7 behinds before kicking a late goal through Jason Horne-Francis before the three-quarter time. Crows continued to take their chances, and at three-quarter time they did lead by 23 points. Port Adelaide early in the last quarter did come hard, with the first goal going to Jason Horne-Francis, but again, they just shot themselves in the foot. So many missed opportunities. In the last quarter, Port Adelaide kicked 1 goal, 7, and it was the story of their whole night. I think they finished on 5 goals, 18, and I think I said it last year with Carlton, but bad kicking's bad football, and it cost Port Adelaide in the end. 23 scoring shots in a game of footy, and you end up with 5 goals. That's just terrible, and they only have themselves to blame, Port Adelaide. So the Crows did run away winners in the end by 30 points. So let's get to the statistics of this game. Top scorer on the AFL Fantasy front, of course, was Jake Saligo with the 113, Ollie Wines with 109, Bergman with the 106, Butters with the 104, Crouch with the 103, and then Dawson with the 100. And now we'll get to the votes. Of course, every single week, guys, we're giving a 3-2-1 voting system for every single game of the AFL season. And then at the end of the year, we will be doing a live countdown of the votes, and we will be giving our award for the second ever Boundary Riders medalist. Last year, Zach Butters was the inaugural winner. We'll already have that stream in the finals by, basically, in between the finals and the end of the season. So, in the end, for the showdown, we had 3 votes going to Jake Saligo, 2 votes went to Worrell, and 1 vote went to Bergman. Now, the reason why Worrell actually got the 3 votes here is he was the leader down back for the Crows all night. Took so many intercept marks when Port Adelaide were going forward. He had 8 intercept possessions, 4 score involvements from half-back, which is absolutely insane for, well, not even off half-back. I mean, he's a mainstay defender for them. And to have 4 score involvements is massive, so really good job from him, and did have 22 touches. The Crows' defence actually played really well, and I think deserves some kudos for their performance. Yeah, I think Worrell in the end was the pick of the bunch, hence why I got 2 votes. And I think I've mentioned it a few times, but this award isn't just given to players who have like 40 touches every single week. That's why Harry Sheezel is yet to get a vote, even though he's had like 35 touches every single game. So we'll see how it goes if he does get some votes in the Brownlow Sheezel, but we're basically looking a lot more on impact, and, you know, of course with midfielders, they're going to get more touches, which means they are in the limelight, but every now and then a player like Worrell, who probably doesn't get the kudos that he deserves, he gets votes here. So obviously way more important than the Brownlow, the Boundary Riders medal. But yeah, Worrell got 2 votes, and Bergman I thought was Port Adelaide's best, hence why he got the 1. After that, we get to a massive game at the MCG. I think it was like 85,000-90,000. Carlton versus Collingwood. Both teams are performing well, and when they are performing well, the crowds truly show up. Massive game, and the game lived up to the hype. Collingwood did win it in the end by 6 points, 1 goal. Nick Dacos in the final moments kicked a brilliant goal, and honestly was probably his best game of the year. But Collingwood won by 6 points, 85-79 over Carlton. Highest scorer in the end was Harry Mackay with the 4 goals. He's in brilliant form this year. And there was one injury concern. It was Bo McQuarrie, who got a knee to the face in the second term, was subbed out with concussion. That's really unfortunate. He does give them a lot of run, and he's had a brilliant season so far, Macquarie, so that's really unlucky. But let's get to the game. Carlton started off really well, strong through the midfield early. They actually had the first 3 clearances in a tight first 15 minutes of the quarter with actually 3 lead changes. But Carlton got 3 straight goals to take a 14-point lead into quarter time. And after the first goal of the second term, Collingwood really started to hit their groove. They dominated the second term with 5 goals in a row, turned a 19-point deficit into an 11-point lead at halftime. So you got to give credit for Collingwood for doing that. They've done that a couple of times this year. Obviously, against Port Adelaide, they were able to turn a 30-odd point deficit into like a 40-point win. So they've been able to really turn around 4 starts to really dominate in the rest of the game. Now, they weren't obviously able to run away against Carlton, but they did really well to break back from 19 points down to take a 11-point lead at halftime. The game really tightened up in the third quarter, with the Blues kicking 3 goals and keeping Collingwood goalless in the third term. So Carlton took a 5-point lead at 3-quarter time and set up for a classic finish between these two massive sides. We had 3 different lead changes in the last quarter, and it was an amazing finish to the game. Collingwood kicked 2 quick goals to take the lead back from Carlton, but then Carlton got 2 of their own to regain the lead. The Pies shortly after kicked a goal to get back in front, but unfortunately for Collingwood, they couldn't really put Carlton away. They were pretty lucky in the end to not actually get overrun. They had a lot of opportunities in the last quarter to take away the win from Carlton. They kicked 4 goals, 5 in the last quarter. We're pretty lucky that Carlton weren't able to convert a couple of chances late. Carlton actually got back to level with just under 5 minutes to go on the clock, but the class of Nick Dacos really shone through in the final moments with a brilliant stoppage goal, and Collingwood were able to run away in the end by 6 points, and probably Nick Dacos' best game of the season so far. I know he had 30-plus touches, but he actually had a little bit more influence on this game. He also kicked 2 goals and kicked the winner. So he did also win the game's medal or whatever it was, best on ground. So let's get to the statistics. On the AFL Fantasy front for this game, Nick Newman top scored with the 144, Nick Dacos with the 122, Akers with the 121, Walsh with the 106, Pendlebury with the 99, and then Harry Mackay with the 96. Now let's get to the votes. 3 votes in the end went to Nick Dacos, 2 votes went to Harry Mackay, and the 1 vote went to Jack Crisp.
So next up, guys, let's get to the first game on Saturday, and it was the Sydney Derby, the Battle of the Bridge, and the Giants started pretty well, but the Swans, as soon as the rain came, it was a really Swans of old performance. They were able to win in the end by 29 points. Big brother beat little brother, 98-69. There were a couple of injury concerns from this game. Tom Green went off early with a rolled ankle and was subbed out at quarter time. Now, they have reported, Giants, that it isn't serious and is a test for next week, so that is good for Giants fans out there and for a couple of AFL Fantasy fans as well. And Tom McCartan, unfortunately, got an incidental bump from Callum Brown in the second quarter, received to the head, and he was subbed out with concussion. Now, looking at the footage, I don't think by any means that Callum Brown was looking to bump at all. It was really a bracing sort of impact, and it's really unfortunate. It is going to happen. He will get a couple of weeks because of the act that was happening, but yeah, I think it was very incidental. And as soon as Callum Brown did it, he put his hands up, said, apologised, and like the Swans players remonstrated, as they have every right to do. And hopefully Tom McCartan is okay. I'm not just saying that as a Swans fan, but I'm sure every footy fan wants that. So let's get to the game though. Very tight start to this game. Despite the Swans kicking the first goal of it, the Giants are actually the better team in the first quarter, and they were able to kick 3 late goals in the first term to take a 15-point lead into quarter time. But then the rain started coming down, and surprisingly enough, it's actually turned into Sydney's favour. It was, like I said, it was a Swans of old sort of performance. What I mean by that is, Sydney obviously, before the last 3 or 4 years really, have been known as a real contested side, really contested, really that get down and dirty. Used to be the Sydney's way, that even if it was a rain game as a Sydney Swans supporter, I knew that we were probably in the box seat to win. But in the last couple of years, if there was a rained game for Sydney, I knew we could be in trouble. But this was a really good performance from Sydney's midfielders. Now granted, Tom Green was off, so that may have been a real big impact for the Giants. As a big-bodied midfielder like him would have been very useful in a contested game that this turned into. But the Swans really did well. They lifted around the contest, and the Swans kicked the only 4 goals of the second term, taking a 9-point lead into half-time. And the Giants didn't change their plans when the game became a wet weather slog. And the weather, when it cleared up, the Swans were really the team that, turned back into their normal brand of footy, their kick mark game. When the Swans try to look through the middle of the ground, a lot more of that sort of football. The Swans really turned it straight back into their normal game plan. And it was really good to see as a Swans fan. The Swans were able to kick 4 goals in the third term. And luckily for the Giants, they did take a few of their chances in the third term with 3 of their own, to only be down by 18 points at 3-quarter time. But the Swans kicked the first 2 goals of the final term, really killed off any chance the Giants had. And in the end, the Swans were able to win by 29 points. Really good win win from Sydney in the end, and it was probably their best game of the season, so that was good to see. Let's get to the statistics, guys, on the AFL fantasy front. Brodie Grundy top scored with the 134, Pete Ling with the 115, Hayward with the 109, Rowbottom with the 101, Callahan with the 100, and Isaac Heaney with the 99. Now, this was really, really tough to pick the votes for this game. Me and my brother both watched this game, and we tried to, we had a little bit of talking in between the inboxes, just seeing who we thought were going to get the 3-2-1 votes. Heaney, Goulden, Rowbottom, Hayward as well. There are a lot of people vying for these votes. Sydney were basically the main talking points. I did think about Callahan because he was very clean for the Giants and was probably their best player on the ground. But in the end, we've gone with the votes here. 3 votes has gone to Chad Warner, 2 votes to Brodie Grundy, and 1 vote has gone to James Jordan. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, why has James Jordan got a vote here? You look at his statistics, nothing really jumps off the page. But James Jordan had the role on Lachie Whitfield. He locked him down very well, had no influence on the game, Lachie Whitfield. Couldn't play that game with that rebounding defender, getting those little handball receives and then being able to kick it inside the forward 50 with his damaging left foot. Absolutely locked that down. James Jordan was absolutely brilliant. And he actually kicked the goal of his own very early on to really make Lachie Whitfield look for him, rather than just him playing off of him. So I believe, and my brother actually said to me, James Jordan deserves a vote for his performance because he was able to do that role and went a long way into Sydney going to win this game. Let's move on. The next game was the Saturday twilight, St Kilda versus North Melbourne. Fox Footy put their best callers on it in Dwayne Russell and Anthony Hudson, which is very interesting to see, but I mean, that was the entertaining part of the game. The rest of it was a bit of a meh sort of game, I'm going to be honest. In the end, the Saints were able to win, though, by 38 points, as they should against North Melbourne. St Kilda got 100 plus points as well, so good to see from them. They finished 103 to North Melbourne 65. Let's get to the game. The Roos started quite well and actually had a 12-point lead midway through the first quarter, but the Saints regained control and took a 1-goal lead into quarter time. In the second term, the Saints started to pull away. They were also brought the pressure in the second term, with their pressure rating actually being about 230 at one stage in the quarter. They also kicked 4 goals to 1 in the second term to a 28-point lead into the main break. North looked a little bit better in the third term with the first goal of it, but the Saints kicked another 4 goals in the quarter and had a 34-point lead into three-quarter time. The Roos did threaten at times in the final quarter to potentially, get somewhat back into the game, but the Saints did well in the last quarter. It was a pretty boring last quarter, I'm going to be honest, but St Kilda did enough and they claimed a 38-point victory, so it was good to see, a good win. I did like the fact that they did play Harry Shees a little bit more up the ground. I know he didn't get as much statistics, but I felt like he had a little bit more impact, and I did like McKerch's game as well. He took that role from Harry Shees, and I think that's more than fair enough for a first-year player. Let him play that for the rest of the year and let Sheasel use his damaging foot skills wing forward rather than half back to, maybe 70 metres out from the defensive goal square. I think that's more of an impact for North Melbourne, and I think he played quite well. I do think there are a couple of disappointing performances. I think Luke Davies-Uniacke was pretty poor. I do think that Nick Larkey, until the last 20 minutes, was very poor. And I do have to give kudos, though, to Tristan Cherry. We'll get into him in a minute, but he was massive, and he's probably leading their best and fairest right now. He is in really good form. But let's get to the statistics. On the AFL fantasy front, Jack Sinclair, whopping top scorer with the 156. Tristan Cherry, massive performance, 127. Rowan Marshall, 117. Wyn Hager with the 112. Wanganeen Miller with the 104. Brad Hill with the 103. And then Zach Fisher with 103 as well. Now let's get into the votes. My brother watched a lot more of this game, so he gave the votes for this one. 3 votes went to Jack Sinclair, 2 votes to Brad Hill, and 1 vote. North Melbourne finally have a player with a vote this season. Didn't know if it was going to happen, but my brother made assured that Tristan Cherry does get the 1 vote. So great performance from him. He's had a very good season. Let's get into Saturday night, a couple of absolute blockbuster games, and we'll start with the first one at the MCG, Melbourne versus Geelong. A little bit surprised that the crowd didn't really get out for this. I mean, it was 50,000, but I feel like these two, especially being first and fourth when the game going into, start of the round, really thought there would have been a little bit more, maybe 60, 70,000, but 50,000. And it was the Demons who knocked off the previously undefeated Cats by 8 points. Melbourne came back at three-quarter time to win this one, 74-66. Massive performance from Melbourne. Really did well down back. One injury concern from this one was Tanner Bruin. He did hurt his shoulder in the second term and was subbed out early stages of the third quarter. So that's really disappointing. He's been one of their best midfielders so far this year, and with Dangerfield being out, he was really going to stand up for them, and he had a pretty decent first quarter and a bit before having the shoulder injury, so that's really concerning for the Cats, and hopefully the injuries don't start to mount for them, because if they do, we know what happened last year. I do think they have a few covers so far to go into that midfield and help out, like Guthrie could go through there for a bit, so I don't think they're completely ruined in the midfield by any stages, but there are a few starting to mount up, so that is a little bit of a concern. Let's get to the game itself, though. Started like you would expect for these two teams. A really tough contested game of footy, neither wanting to take a backward step. The Demons to kick the last 2 goals of the first term to take a 4-point lead into quarter time. The start of the second term was very free-flowing, which was quite surprising for these two teams. There was only 2 stoppages in the first 8 to 10 minutes of the second term, but both teams were woeful in front of goal. No one actually kicked the goal in the second term, which is the first time that's happened since 2022. Melbourne kicked 5 behinds, Geelong kicked 4 behinds, which saw Melbourne lead by 5 points at half-time. Then finally the teams actually got their kicking boots on. It was a real shock to me. The game started to open up in the third term. We saw 4 straight goals in a row, which was a rarity in this game. The Cats broke away and broke in front with a late goal to take a 2-point lead into the final change. And then with an amazing last quarter, the Demons started strongly. They kicked 2 goals. Then the Cats came back, quickly responded with 2 of their own. Then the Demons again responded with 2 goals. Set up for a great finish. The Cats did get back to within 3 points, but 2 crucial misses from Jezza Cameron were the difference. On a dirty night for him, he really had a poor performance. And the Demons were able to hold on for an 8-point victory. Massive win from them. They've had a couple of wins this season, the Demons, but this is by far their greatest. Let's get to the statistics. AFL Fantasy Front, of course, Max Holmes top scored with the 120. Guthrie, this is Zach Guthrie with the 113. He's had a massive season. Stephen May with the 111. Clayton Oliver with the 106. Atkins with the 101. And then Caleb Windsor, really good game from him. He got 99. Now let's get to the votes. 3 votes went to Jake Lever. He's really polling well in the last couple of weeks. Tom McDonald with the 2 votes and Tom Atkins with the 1. Now, Tom McDonald, again, not a lot of statistics, but he played on Jeremy Cameron, kept him goalless. Absolutely massive performance from him. If he lets Jeremy Cameron go in this game, they win it, Geelong. He did have a couple of late chances, Jeremy Cameron, but he wasted them. And I think if he has the confidence and he's up and about, Jeremy Cameron, he's going to kick those goals. So Tom McDonald deserves all the kudos in the world. He was massive in this game. So let's move to the next game. West Coast Eagles up against the Bombers. The Bombers seem to have had this game done in the third quarter going into the fourth. But the Eagles fought their way back and just fell short in the end by 1 goal. The Bombers won 77-71. Were a couple of injury concerns from this game. First of all, it was Noah Long who was subbed out in the third quarter with a knee injury. Jai Caldwell was also subbed out on the Bombers side with a calf strain. And then Elliot Yeo, probably the biggest one of the bunch. He did have a low-grade calf strain and was out in the fourth term. Now, my brother watched this one. I watched the Melbourne game. He told me that it was a low-grade one. He said it's not too serious, but they did want to take a precautionary approach. So I think maybe he'll be out this week, Elliot Yeo, because they want to be very cautious with him. Obviously, with a lot of injury concerns, a lot of injuries he's had over the past 2 to 3 years, Elliot Yeo. So we'll see how that one pans out, but that's very disappointing for the West Coast Eagles. Let's move to the game. Very slow start to this one. We didn't actually see a goal halfway through the first quarter. The Essendon did miss some big chances and only had a 10-point lead at quarter time. The Eagles actually kicked the first 2 goals of the second term and took the lead, but the Bombers then went on to kick 4 straight in a row, 5 of the next 6, to take a 22-point lead at half-time. The Eagles actually started to get back to it in the third term, kicking 4 of the next 5 of their own. But the Bombers did end the third quarter on a high note with 2 late goals to take the lead by 15 points. It kind of just felt like at this point that the Bombers were just going to be too good. They were just going to hold the Eagles, 3 or 4 goals away, and it just felt like that's how the game was going to end. But in the final term, it was very interesting. The Eagles got an early goal, got themselves back to within a kick as well. The Bombers did respond with one of their own, but the Eagles broke back with a late goal from Jack Williams, which did set up for a massive final minute and a half or so. The Bombers did hold on for a 6-point win, obviously just missing out last week in the draw on Anzac Day, with Kyle Langford missing a crucial chance. That didn't happen again. It was very close. Thought maybe they'll get 2 draws in a row. But the Bombers did hold on for a big win. Let's move to the statistics. AFL Fantasy Front, Darcy Parish top score with the 143. Nick Mant with the 119. Zach Merritt with the 110. And 3 goals, by the way. Very good to see from him. Tim Kelly with the 100. Duggan with the 98, along with Xavier Dersma. Now, let's get to the votes. My brother has gone with Zach Merritt with the 3 votes. 2 votes to Darcy Parish. And the 1 vote to Tom Barrass. Now, my brother was going to give Sam Durham a vote here, but he did say he gave away a couple of crucial free kicks late in the game and nearly cost him. So he did say that Tom Barrass was by far West Coast's best performer, so he got the 1 vote in the end. Let's move to the first game on Sunday. The Tigers up against the Dockers, and the Dockers pretty much led this one from start to finish. They did really well, Fremantle, and they went on to win pretty convincingly in the end by 54 points. First time they've hit over 100 this year. 103 the Dockers, 49 to the Tigers. Highest scorer in the end was Josh Tracy. He's had a very good year so far for the Dockers. Always has been a good player to bring the ball to ground, but he's really clunking some good marks this year, and he did get a career-high 4 goals, so congratulations to him. Sean Darcy did actually get subbed out in this game with a tight calf. I think it was precautionary, but I do think they'll take the smart approach here, and he'll probably miss next week against Sydney. And let's be honest, they've got Luke Jackson there, who's, I think, a very good ruckman. I think most people would say that. Obviously, he was all Australian last year. Well, he was definitely in the squad, so I think Jackson will take over that role pretty easily. Let's move to the game. So the Tigers kicked an early goal to start this one, but the Dockers did really well for the remainder of the first quarter, kicked the next 3 and took a 13-point lead into quarter time. The Tigers looked really sluggish in the second term, and the Dockers took full advantage. They kicked 3 more goals in the second term to make it a 6 in a row. It not only kept the Tigers goalless, but took a 31-point lead into the main break. The Dockers kicked 2 early goals in the third term, but finally we saw the Tigers respond. They kicked their first goal in 55 minutes, and the Tigers finally brought some pressure in the third quarter. They went on to kick 3 straight in a row, and they're also back within 3 goals themselves. But the Dockers did stop the rot. They took the lead by 24 points into three-quarter time, and then the Dockers really flexed their muscles in the final quarter. After the Tigers did, I think, pretty much shot their bullet in that third term. Dockers kicked 7 goals in the final quarter, registered 100 points plus for the first time this year, and won by 54 points in the end. Now, Tracy doesn't get into the votes because I really feel like he didn't really blow onto the scene until the last quarter. But his last quarter was massive. He had 3 marks inside the forward 50, 2 tackles inside the forward 50, and kicked 3 goals. Massive performance from Josh Tracy in that final quarter, so really kudos to him. He did really well. Let's move to the statistics of this game. Luke Ryan, top scorer with the 161. Massive performance. He had 39 disposals, a career high. He was massive. Caleb Sarong with the 141. Brayshaw with the 125, along with Hayden Young. Short with the 103. Vlosten with the 98, and then Johnson with the 97. But let's move to the votes. 3 votes went to Luke Ryan, 2 votes to Hayden Young, and the 1 vote went to Caleb Sarong. The reason why Hayden Young did get the 2 votes here is because of his 2 goals. He did really well, and his foot skills are absolutely amazing. To see a left footer like him move the ball so smoothly, it's almost, I wouldn't say it just yet, but he's very Pendlebury-like. Just has that sort of that movement that just people just somehow can't catch him, and he's such a great kick. So he's been a really good find for the Dockers, and he's going to be a mainstay in there for the next 10 years. Next up, guys, let's get to a big upset in round 8, and it was Hawthorn with a very young side beating the Bulldogs by 7 points. Hawthorn won 98-91. There was one injury concern from this game, which was Tom Liberatore, who came off late with a hit to the head. Now, it is unknown at this stage if he was concussed or not, so we'll have to wait and see on that front. But a truly dirty day for the Dogs. Let's get to the game. The Dogs actually started off very strongly with the first 3 goals of the game, and it looked very ominous early. But to Hawthorn's credit, they did respond with 4 of the next 6 goals and only be down by 5 points at quarter time. Now, the Hawks actually did chuck James Sicily up forward because he did have an injury concern which occurred in the first quarter, which actually gave them a target to go to. The Hawks were very good in the second term with 3 goals in a row to take control, but the Dogs did kick a late goal to only be down by 8 points at half time. Now, both teams did miss some crucial chances in the third term, both teams kicking 2 goals for, but it did set up for a very exciting final quarter. Now, it was a very high scoring last term. The Dogs kicked 6 goals straight, and in most games you would think that would be enough to win, but the young Hawks were outstanding in the final term. They kicked 5 goals of their own, and were strong with their mids in the final few moments of the game, not to let the ball escape from the stoppage, able to lock it inside their forward 50 so the Dogs mids couldn't get to work and try to get the ball forward. And the young Hawthorn team actually did really well, despite missing a couple of chances late in the game, to hold on to a 7-point victory. So, have to give massive credit to Hawthorn. They were brilliant. Their young players stood up. Their first gamer in Deer was very good up forward. He kicked 2 goals. Let's talk about the statistics. On the AFL Fantasy front, Tim English top scorer with the 127. Jarman Impey with the 126. He's been good this season. Lloyd Meek with the 116 along with Dylan Moore. 115 to Treloar. Dale with the 105. And then Bontempelli with the 103. Now let's get to the votes. 3 votes in the end went to Jarman Impey, 2 votes to Lloyd Meek, and the 1 vote went to Marcus Bontempelli. Me and my brother did discuss about the 1 vote because it was a little bit hard to choose from, but we did feel like Marcus Bontempelli almost got the Bulldogs over the line. He had a massive last quarter, hence why he got the 1 vote. Now, before we move into the last game, I have to talk about the Bulldogs. That is almost embarrassing, I would say. That I know Hawthorn aren't North Melbourne bad, but they have not been very good this season at all. And if the Bulldogs are that far off the pace, it is very damning because they have some of the best forwards in the game. They have a outstanding midfield, and their defence, yes, isn't the greatest, but they've got some of the best halfbacks in the game as well, and they are getting beaten by Hawthorn, who, by the way, didn't have really a key forward in this game. They had to chuck up a first gamer, Jack Gunston, who's been very poor this season, and James Sicily, who's played in defence, and they couldn't win this game. And their midfielders as well were much better, Hawthorn, a very young midfield, and they got smashed. The ground ball numbers were atrocious against the Bulldogs. Luke Beveridge needs to do something about this. I'm not going to sit there and say he needs to be sacked, but he needs to do something about it, because at the moment, they are not picking players like Caleb Daniel and Riley Sanders, and they're playing people like Bramble and stuff who are not performing. So I don't know if he has a grudge against Riley Sanders, but why is he not playing? He had a very good game in the VFL, I believe, and he played very well last week as well. They put him on as a sub. I don't have an issue with the guy being a little bit upset when he got subbed off. I think he wants to be on the ground, helping his team out, not being subbed off. And for some reason, he's not playing. So I don't know why that is happening. But if you want to win games, you got to pick your best. And for some reason, they're not picking one of the best kicks in the comp, Caleb Daniel, and a young star up-and-comer in Riley Sanders. So I don't know what's wrong, but right now the Bulldogs are in atrocious form, and they're playing Richmond next week, and who knows if they're going to win that one. So very interesting times for the Bulldogs. I think they should be competing for the finals, and right now they're sitting in, I think, 13th spot. So not very good from the Bulldogs at all. And guys, let's get to the final game of the round. Of course, it was the Q Clash, and the Lions finally get their season somewhat back on track with a big win by 34 points over the Gold Coast Suns. Lions won 79-45. There were a lot of injuries from this game, so let's just break that one down really quickly. We'll start off with one that just happened before the game. I think it was maybe half an hour before the game started. Brendan Starskovic, who was a very late withdrawal, and they had to bring in a debutant in Morris, who just played a full VFL game hours before, who actually performed quite well, but looks like Starskovic with a strain to the calf may be out for a few weeks. Lincoln McCarthy could also be done for the rest of the season with an ACL. It's really devastating news if that is the case, because he was hampered with a lot of injuries in his career so far. So hopefully, let's hope for the best, but probably fear for the worst. Noah Answorth did get a knee to the head in a marking contest and was subbed out at quarter time. Was out at quarter time. And then Darcy Gardner in the second term was running towards a marking contest and then clutched at his knee. It was so innocuous. It didn't really look like anything happened. I didn't even see much of a twisting motion, so hopefully everything's okay with him. But the Lions were down to 2 on the bench. It was such a weird start to the game and into the second quarter as well. But let's get to the game. The Suns did kick the first goal, but the Lions had the majority of the momentum in the first quarter. They were the much better side. They had finally brought back their dynamic ball movement, which we've basically not seen. It's been non-existent this season so far from the Lions. And honestly, it was shades of their 2023 form. And they led by 22 points at quarter time. Into the second quarter, the Lions continued their great form. They ended up kicking 3 goals, 2 very early on, and then kept the Suns goalless in the second term. Only got 2 goals to halftime, so the Lions looked really good. In the third term, though, the Lions absolutely butchered the footy in front of goal. They kicked 9 points, 8 goals, 8 at halftime, 8 goals, 17 at three-quarter time. They did give the Suns a little bit of a chance, but the Suns didn't really have enough opportunities. Only kicked 2 goal, 1 in the quarter. They were still 36 points down at three-quarter time. Now, in the last quarter, the Suns kicked the first 2 goals of it, gave themselves a chance. It felt like maybe they could give themselves a bit of hope. But then the Lions were able to kick a couple of quick goals midway through the quarter. Did well enough in the end. Terrible goal kicking. 10 goals, 19 from the Lions. But they were able to win in the end by 34 points. So the Lions somewhat get their season back on track. Let's look at the statistics now. And on the AFL Fantasy front, of course, Dane Zorko top score with the 182. He was massive. Josh Dunkley with the 151. Lachie Neale with the 137. Jared Berry with the 131. McCluggage with the 112. And then Sam Flanders with the 104. So now we'll get into the votes, and my brother has actually given the votes for the last game of the round, the Q Clash. So he has gone and given Dane Zorko the 3 votes, not really surprised by that. Josh Dunkley got the 2 votes, and Harris Andrews got the 1. He's given the 2 votes to Josh Dunkley for his magnificent tagging role on Matt Rao, keeping him to only 16 touches and 2 clearances, which is unheard of for Matt Rao this season. So great result. Very disappointing from the Suns. They should have done a lot better. The Lions had so many injuries in this game, and for some reason they just didn't want to open up the game. They didn't want to make the Lions run, and the Lions in the end were able to do enough to win this game. But finally, guys, of course, let's get to the ladder. And right on top of the ladder are my Sydney Swans. Glad to see them up there. Good percentage of 147 as well. 7-1 with the Geelong Cats in second spot. Giants are in 3rd. Melbourne are in 4th. Essendon are in 5th with that draw, of course. That 95% is going to have to be much improved as we go on, though. Dockers are in 6th spot. Really surprised to see them up there. Port Adelaide are in 7th. Carlton are in 8th spot. So, despite a lot of talk about Carlton being like premiership favourites a few weeks ago, they're sitting in 8th spot right now. Collingwood are in 9th. Gold Coast are in 10th. Western Bulldogs are in 11th. Crows are in 12th with their win. Lions are in 13th with their win. St Kilda are in 14th with their win. So those 3 teams are able to get some wins and get themselves... Well, they're in the same spot they were last week, but they did get a win to get themselves closer to maybe a sneaky finals berth. West Coast are in 15th spot. Hawthorn are in 16th. Richmond are in 17th. And still down the bottom with no wins so far this season are North Melbourne. But guys, that's basically all we have for the review of Round 8. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you watched on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Got a video coming out tomorrow for the couple of trade rumours. So first trade video of the year. So make sure to check that one out. And on Spotify, make sure to leave us 5 stars. And also follow us so you're notified on the podcast, the reviews, of course. And we will be releasing the trade video as an audio version so you guys can listen to it on Spotify as well. So you'll be notified on that if you follow on Spotify. But thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you all next week.